What happens when outlaws try to rob two banks at once in broad daylight? The answer turned a quiet Kansas morning into the bloodiest shootout in Old West history. October 5th, 1892. Coffeyville, Kansas. A town so ordinary that nothing exciting ever happened there. Farmers came in to sell grain. Shopkeepers opened their stores. Women walked to the market. Just another Wednesday morning on the frontier. But 5 men rode into town that day with a plan so bold it bordered on insane. They were the Dalton Gang, and they weren't there to buy supplies. Bob Dalton was the leader. 23 years old, cold eyes, faster with a gun than most men were with words. His brother Grat rode beside him, slower in the head but loyal to the bone. Emmett Dalton, the youngest, barely 21, still had something soft in his face that hadn't been beaten out by outlaw life yet. Then there was Dick Broadwell and Bill Powers, two hired guns who'd thrown in with the Daltons for a cut of the take. They'd been running from the law for 2 years. Train robberies mostly, a few stagecoaches. They'd hit targets all across Kansas, Oklahoma, and California. The law wanted them bad. Rewards were posted in every territory. Their faces were on wanted posters in every sheriff's office from Dodge City to San Francisco. But Bob Dalton had a dream. He wanted to pull off something no outlaw gang had ever done. Something that would make them legends. Something bigger than Jesse James. Bigger than the younger brothers. Bigger than anyone. He wanted to rob 2 banks at the same time. Not in different towns. Not on different days. At the exact same moment. In the same town. Right across the street from each other. It was madness. But Bob believed they could do it. He'd been planning it for months. Coffeyville had 2 banks sitting catty-corner on the town plaza. The First National Bank and the Conger Bank. Both would be full of cash that morning. If they hit them simultaneously, they'd be in and out before anyone knew what happened. 10 minutes. Maybe less. Then they'd ride out with more money than they'd ever seen. There was just one problem. Bob Dalton had grown up in Coffeyville. So had Grat and Emmett. People knew them. They'd gone to school there. Played in those streets as kids. Their mother still lived just outside town. So they wore disguises. Fake beards. Different hats. They figured that would be enough. It wasn't. They tied their horses in an alley behind the plaza. The plan was simple. Bob and Emmett would hit the First National Bank. Grat, Dick, and Bill would take the Conger Bank. They'd grab the cash, meet back at the horses, and ride like hell for the Oklahoma border. At 9:42 in the morning, they walked into town. Bob and Emmett pushed through the doors of the First National Bank first. 3 employees stood behind the counter. A handful of customers waited in line. Bob pulled his Winchester rifle from under his coat. Emmett drew his revolver. Hands up. This is a robbery. The customers froze. One woman gasped. The bank teller, a man named Thomas Ayers, stared at Bob's face. Even with the fake beard, there was something familiar about those eyes. "You're Bob Dalton," Ayers said quietly. Bob's jaw tightened. "Shut up and open the safe." Across the street, Grat Dalton and his 2 partners walked into the Conger Bank. Same routine. Guns out. Threats made. But the cashier there, a man named Charles Ball, gave them an answer they weren't expecting. "The safe's on a time lock. It won't open for another 10 minutes. Grat blinked. "What? Time lock? Can't open it early. You'll have to wait." This wasn't part of the plan. Bob had said 10 minutes total. In and out. But now they'd have to sit there, guns drawn, while the whole town woke up to what was happening. And the town was waking up fast. Outside, a man named Alec McKenna was walking past the plaza when he noticed something strange. 5 horses tied up in the alley. Saddlebags packed. Rifles in the scabbards. He looked closer and saw the men inside the banks. Saw the guns. He didn't hesitate. He ran. Bank robbery. They're robbing the banks. His voice echoed across the plaza. Heads turned. Shopkeepers stepped outside. Someone rang the fire bell. Within seconds, the entire town knew. And Coffeyville wasn't some helpless frontier town. These were farmers and merchants who'd fought off cattle rustlers and coyotes and drought. They owned guns. They knew how to use them. Men ran home to grab their rifles. Others ducked into the hardware store and loaded up. Within minutes, armed citizens were taking positions around the plaza, behind water troughs, inside doorways, on rooftops. The Dalton Gang was surrounded, and they didn't even know it yet. Hey, if you're hooked on this story, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that button. Turn on the notification bell too, so you don't miss the next one. These stories take a lot of work to put together, and your support means everything. All right, back to Coffeyville. Inside the First National Bank, Bob Dalton was stuffing cash into a grain sack. Emmett stood guard by the door, rifle aimed at the hostages. Everything was going smooth. They had maybe $4,000 already. Another minute and they'd be done. Then Emmett heard it. Shouting, running footsteps, the sharp crack of a gunshot. "Bob," he said, voice tight. "Something's wrong." Bob looked up. Through the window, he could see men with rifles moving into position. His stomach dropped. They know. Across the street, Grat heard the same sounds. He looked at Dick Broadwell. "We gotta go. Now." But the safe still wasn't open. They'd been standing there for 8 minutes, and they had nothing. No money. No score. Just 5 outlaws trapped in a building with an angry town closing in. Grat made a decision. Forget the safe. We're leaving. They shoved the bank employees toward the back door and stepped outside into the alley. Immediately, bullets started flying. A shopkeeper named George Coubin fired from across the street. The shot missed. Grat spun and fired back. Coubin dropped, dead before he hit the ground. That was the first shot. It opened the floodgates. Gunfire erupted from every direction. The Dalton Gang ran for their horses, firing as they moved. Citizens shot from windows, doorways, rooftops. Bullets kicked up dust, shattered glass, splintered wood. Bob and Emmett burst out of the First National Bank and sprinted toward the alley. A townsman named Lucius Baldwin stepped into the street with a shotgun. Bob shot him in the chest. Baldwin died on the plaza stones. Grat was hit first. A bullet tore through his arm. Then another caught him in the neck. He staggered but kept moving. Blood poured down his shirt. Dick Broadwell took a round to the back. He collapsed against a fence, gasping, but somehow pulled himself up and kept going. Bill Powers made it 3 steps before a bullet hit him square in the chest. He went down hard and didn't get up. The horses were just ahead. If they could reach them, they still had a chance. But the alley had turned into a kill zone. Bullets came from every angle. There was no cover, no escape. Bob Dalton fired his rifle until it clicked empty. He pulled his revolver and kept shooting. A bullet hit him in the side, then another in the shoulder. He stumbled, blood soaking through his coat, but he wouldn't go down. Grat reached the horses first. He grabbed the reins with his good hand, trying to pull himself into the saddle. A rifle shot hit him in the throat. He dropped to the dirt, choking on his own blood. Bob saw his brother fall. He screamed something nobody could hear over the gunfire and ran toward him. Another bullet caught him in the chest. He fell beside Grat, reaching out to touch his brother's hand. Both of them died there, together, in the dust. Emmett was the only Dalton still standing. He'd taken a bullet in the hip, but kept moving. He could see the horses. He could see freedom. He swung into the saddle and was about to ride when he looked back. Bob and Grat were lying in the dirt, dead, his brothers. Emmett couldn't leave them. He turned his horse around and rode back into the gunfire. He leaned down, trying to grab Bob's body, trying to pull him onto the horse. It was impossible. It was suicide, but he tried anyway. A shotgun blast hit him in the back. Then another. He fell from the saddle, his body torn apart by buckshot. He lay there in the alley, barely breathing, surrounded by his dead brothers. The shooting stopped. 12 minutes. That's how long the whole thing lasted. 12 minutes from the first shot to the last. When the smoke cleared, 4 members of the Dalton Gang were dead. Bob, Grat, Dick Broadwell, Bill Powers. 4 townspeople had also been killed. Another 3 were wounded. Emmett Dalton was still alive. Barely. The townspeople dragged him out of the alley and laid him on the plaza. A doctor came running. Emmett had been shot over 20 times. Nobody thought he'd survive the night. But he did. They patched him up, put him on trial, and sentenced him to life in prison. He served 14 years before getting paroled. After that, he went straight. Moved to California. Wrote a book about the Coffeyville raid. Spent the rest of his life telling people that crime didn't pay. The town of Coffeyville buried the 4 dead outlaws in the local cemetery. To this day, you can visit their graves. Right there in Kansas, under simple headstones, lie the men who tried to rob 2 banks at once. People still talk about that morning. Historians call it one of the most violent shootouts in Old West history. The Dalton Gang thought they'd become legends, and they did, just not the way they planned. Bob Dalton wanted to do something bigger than Jesse James. He got his wish, but he paid for it with his life and the lives of everyone who followed him into that alley. Sometimes ambition doesn't make you a legend. Sometimes it just gets you killed. The plaza in Coffeyville looks different now. Paved streets, modern buildings. But if you stand there on a quiet morning, you can still picture it. 5 men walking into town with a plan. Gunfire echoing off brick walls. Bodies in the dust. And you can almost hear Bob Dalton's last words, whispered to no one, as he lay dying in that alley. "We should have taken one bank.